Good evening. Welcome to the March 11th, 2019 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. First item on our agenda is public input. If anybody has something to talk about that's we're not going to be covering otherwise, please come to a microphone.
My name is Bob Heavey. I represent the Blackstone Mill, which is 6 Depot Street in Grafton. And we are very interested in putting a marijuana facility there, not a dispensary, but a growing plant. And I'm not so sure how it works with the zoning because it's a historical building. It was an industrial building, a manufacturing building for well over 100 years. And it should be grandfathered. And I was really wanting to get some feedback from your board to what process I'd use to move forward.
So I had met Mr. Heavey at the planning counter window and recommended that he speak during public input. One of the things is that, you know, for the planning board, when we developed our marijuana establishments bylaw last year, we floated the potential addition of multiple marijuana establishments, but they were just retail marijuana within all of the districts. And we hadn't given any consideration whether or not there's any of the more industrial or even research uses within the other base zoning districts. And because of within the next couple of weeks the warrant closes, I had recommended to Mr. Heavey that this is really the fastest way to have a dialogue with the board to inquire whether or not there's anything to be considered as far as a zoning change. I had also recommended to Mr. Heavey that if he has a land use attorney that might want to look to see what could happen as far as it's not a permitted use within the village mixed use zoning district, but uses there do not fully conform with the existing mixed use zoning bylaw. And whether or not there are other avenues such as going through the ZBA or might be available. That would be something we'd then share with town council and building inspector to make a determination. I'm really not quite sure as far as like any sort of grandfathered use of that for anything else except for what's there. And maybe things that are close to that. And that's why I recommend it as far as coming in, as far as we have a larger building that was used for industrial purposes without a sale component, whether or not that was something worthy of visiting.
Okay. First of all, you're talking about growing recreational,
Well,
not necessarily growing, because I think growing medical comes under, you know, until the CCC gets around to straightening things out. I think it actually is a separate licensing issue.
But that's not on our side.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
From our side, it ends up being just the bylaw.
Our bylaws cover. We have separate places for medical and so you'd be talking about the adult use or recreational growing, manufacturing, whatever the right term is.
Right.
I personal opinion offhand without, you know, having had a chance to think about it. I suspect that if you want to get action soon, we're running out of time for the Springtown meeting, and I think pursuing down the grandfathering and all of that is not even come close. That's you know, I don't think that's going to work. But it's tricky. This is a tricky subject. I think that the thing to do would be to put the use you're interested in an article for the Springtown meeting. in VMU.
Okay. I have, since I came here today, I have got an attorney on board who does zoning. I also had the pleasure of meeting Clyde, I believe his name is. He's 86 years old. He's worked in every department in Grafton. And I don't believe he's 86. I think he lied to me there, but I'm not going to say anything. He looks too damn young to be 86. But he waited while I was talking
Yeah,
at the planning board, because he was very enthusiastic about us using that building for this use. And the reasoning was, amongst other things, we're gonna have zero traffic impact. We're gonna have one truck, probably come up once a week. And we will have people who are working there, but we have plenty of parking. And we're gonna spend a small fortune on doing the building over inside and out.
yeah.
It's a historical building. That whole section of town, Farnhamsville, was created around that mill. And we've sat on it now for a lot of years. And it's hard to find a use for it. And this is a perfect fit. We can spend a lot of money on the outside, redo the whole place. And we got a lot of land up in the area that the abutters, the neighbors could use. And I think it's a home run for the town. The town would be very successful from a tax point of view on it, would get that whole into town.
It'd
I
be
mean-
great to have something.
Yeah.
Positive rather than
Some
negative.
good use, some real use there, it's been a long time since you've had a lot. I do know, if you follow all of, like Charlton and all of that, where they're talking about manufacturing, they're looking very closely at air filtering. Because apparently, inside these grow facilities, you know where you are, there's no question about it. And it takes some pretty good handling. And I'm thinking the older building is gonna be harder to seal up.
We're gonna have to encase that older building
Right.
pretty much totally, because of the fact that it's wood, and there's gonna be a lot of moisture, so we have to go around the entire inside and treat it with a special polyurethane type of material. If you've ever if you own a pickup truck and you've put a rust-proofing bed inside it, it's kinda like what you're doing, but for the entire building. Also on the air, we have the chimney, which we've lowered, but we'd be going up significantly. We've already done a lot of research and all of that.
Okay.
So we'd have it, and also you can't have a lot of air motion when you're growing. There's a lot of, and I think this hits more at probably the state level, but the requirements that we have to do for that building are significant to be able to grow.
Yeah.
But that's all, we're taking all of that into consideration.
Any idea, do you have a target on how many square feet or whatever you?
Well, the building is a little over 100,000 square feet.
Okay,
But a good portion of that would be used for prep, for storage, and uses like that. So I think conservatively, would probably be using 60% of it for grow, and the remaining for, I mean, you have to have pretty significant rooms for people to come in and change, because
yeah.
everybody has to wear protective outfits when they're in there. So that's, and I think we're gonna employ quite a few people, so that's gonna take up a lot of space. And as I say, there's just bulk storage and a lot of stuff like that. So I think I'm thinking maybe 40% of the building will get chewed up on uses like that. But we'd be moving the product out at, it's only about a little over a month as a grow period for it. So and we'd be using all LED lighting. So there's a lot of stuff that has to take place. And then the outside, which every time I am there and I look up and I see the windows, it's not very nice. We'd be tearing them all out and putting back in windows that would look like the original windows, which I think I think the whole building could be beautiful if we finished it.
Well, of course, if we get to where the zoning allows it and make an application, there's gonna be a whole hearing process.
Sure.
And we'll go through all of that in depth. My question is I suppose my first question is, who else has
Yeah.
something to say?
I think it's an interesting situation from a zoning perspective. That is it's a historic factory, basically an industrial type building, a long history of being used for that. And it doesn't fit into the current zoning very well. But here's an opportunity to preserve a historic building and continue to use it for its historical use. And that, ordinarily, I don't think that a change in use of that nature may not qualify as a grandfathered zoning. But it's certainly, to me, it's worth giving some thought to finding a way to make the zoning work for this, because this sounds like a wonderful opportunity for this particular building.
I think you make the zoning work by passing an amendment.
Yeah, and I think, exactly how to express it is sort of some of the details around that. I mean, the simple thing to do is to allow this kind of use in the village mixed use district. There may not be very many places where such a use would be practical in that district, but here's an example of one which seems eminently practical.
Well, also, you have to remember with the current proposals that we're making to the Village Mixed Use District, we are differentiating them from a uniform base zoning to things that then can adjust depending on the VMU that we're creating. So the Worcester Street versus Westboro Road versus South Grafton, they are able to differentiate themselves from a character standpoint, so that we're not applying a uniform standard that would be in every single district.
Separate
And-
columns in the use table.
Right.
Yeah, but another factor is that the intent behind our current and proposed village mixed use is to provide a lot of flexibility in the use. And there's probably not too many places in any existing or proposed VMU district where it would make any sense at all to create a facility of the size of this building. But this building's already there.
Yeah.
So what would be so wrong with allowing this kind of use in a place like this, where it seems to fit very well?
And it would give the building life again for a long
Yeah.
period of time. I mean, as it is now, I'm embarrassed. People ask me, do you know who owns that building? I usually say no.
What building?
But
Yeah.
this is a chance to bring it back to life and make it really pretty.
So Joe, what does the timeline look like? When would something have to be submitted to the warrant?
I believe it's the end of the, I'm actually just was looking at it because, I believe, it's still something that it's like the end of, March. So that week we meet on the 25th, and I think it's that Friday.
What I'm thinking about is, one option is for the planning board to submit an article, the other is for the applicant to submit an article. Because he would file directly with the selectmen,
Right.
and so he wouldn't have to wait for the meeting or
And I was just looking online to see if there was actually a downloadable form for a citizen's petition. I wasn't able to find it.
I don't think there is one.
Quick. So, and that may be something that the town clerk's office they control, so they can identify who takes something out. I don't know. But I did email the town clerk just to find out. And I'm just forgetting off the top of my head what the number of signatures for annual town meeting is for
10.
10. So
10 certified signatures.
of town
But again,
residents.
well. But,
So that would-
should we be pointing towards a citizen's petition, or should we be talking about us doing?
Well, the next opportunity for us to do something would be March 25th. That window starts getting very tight.
That still leaves enough time for
It does for
hearings.
Yes, it does, because if there is a citizen's petition, we have to be forwarded it anyways. It doesn't lead much time to prepare a report, but there's enough time for a hearing. One of the ways is that if you were able to, from the town clerk, get a citizen's petition form, that then you identify what that article is, and it basically is changing the use table for that specific use within the VMU, and that would be
SG.
dash SG, because we're proposing differentiating the different VMU districts. And then they need to certify 10
Voter signature.
voters within Grafton. So get a couple for extra wiggle room. That might be something that is able to be done faster than waiting for our next meeting on the 25th.
Well,
And then
would it work for the two of you to work together?
I was just gonna say, if you had any questions, I'd be able to just
Okay.
work with you at the counter as far as just reviewing.
And
anything.
if that's running into problems, then our agenda,
Right,
and talk about it, at least consider putting it on
right.
Okay.
the warrant.
Yeah, it's probably worthwhile to have, to put this topic on our agenda for the next meeting regardless of,
Yeah, because it'd have to be potentially an action item, if we were going to submit an article, if it comes to.
Yes.
Yeah.
If he hasn't gotten in and had his signatures, okayed by 2 weeks from now. Then the only way to make the time is for us to,
Right.
okay?
Okay. Thank you very, very much, and I'll stop by and see
Okay.
you. Thank you
Sounds
very much.
Thank you, good to see you.
Thanks.
Been a while.
good to hear the possibility of something great happening there too.
Okay, any other public input? No other public input. Okay. A&R 121 North Street.
Do we have anyone here for 121 North Street? Guess not.
Apparently not.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pass this down.
Have you looked at it online?
So, for you, and let me just get it on screen here. Before you is an A&R that carves the property at 221 North Street into two parcels.
221, 121?
121, sorry.
1, 2, what's the difference? They're close
Exactly. I got the north.
in the 21.
Exactly. So this is a little interesting, and this is where, quite honestly, being not a surveyor, I have to somewhat rely on, for the electronic version, I don't have the stamp. I hope you have a stamped version there. Is that, do you have the stamp? I know on the Mylar we do have the stamp.
Yeah.
But either way, we have the surveyor stamp on this. They did research back through the when portions of this property as well as adjacent properties was taken to put in the pike. So they did various research in order to identify how North Street was established and what it used to be. Because with the taking, essentially that identifies the property line. And what they found was that when you look at the plan, their property, as is laid out in the deed, doesn't exactly line up with where the state established North Street. There's a little bit of sliver that essentially is more or less what Norman Hill identified to me as a remainder of town land that was neither decommissioned or abandoned by the town, and given to the property owner, or utilized within the state layout. So it basically is hanging out there. That's why you see this triangular sliver and the frontage coming off of that western side of that triangle. There are extension lines for what matches the deed, and then basically reading the descriptions as far as coming southeasterly to a brook. Now, I met with Brian Cizurko. We spent about an hour trying to figure things out. In the end, it still doesn't change what is an A&R. Is there access from a street? Is it practical access? And does it meet the frontage requirements? In essence, to those three questions, it is. There may be other things that deal with zoning compliance, with the creation of area and calculation of wetlands that may impact lot area. But ultimately, even if a zoning violation is shown regarding area, that doesn't prevent us from endorsing an A&R for demonstrating compliance that it has frontage, that it has access, and that is on a town maintained road. So,
My problem is,
yeah.
well, I'm not sure exactly what that triangle does in terms of access and or defining frontage. I would have drawn the line between the two lots so that it intersected the state layout at 140 feet. If you extend that line over there and measure the frontage on the state layout, it'll be several feet short of
Yes.
140. And I don't see anything particular, since they're gonna take the house down anyway, that line is close to. I don't see any harm in that being moved to where, that question wouldn't, make significant difference. And so that would be what I'd like, when I looked at this, somebody else is gonna have to go through whether they have frontage on the, what frontage on a non-existent, past chunk of North Street.
No, I know, and that's where
means-
the other part is that if the state took the easement but then turned it over to the town, if you have a old portion of the town road, the state portion that then was taken over by the town when we sort of accepted that new layout, although because it's the same thing, they reconfigured what became Bicknell. So all as part of this whole taking did all of that.
I think they probably created what's now big.
Yeah, that's what they did at that point, because and they on the old plans they called it Carroll Road Extension.
Yeah,
So there's a couple options, because when you look at, you have 140 and then you have 90 plus another 90, so you are able to then identify, okay, well, even if you extended it, you still can have on the regular North Street, you can still have the 140,
but not the way it's drawn right now.
not the way it's drawn right now.
And that's my problem. I'd like to see it drawn so that the shorter of the two is 140, as it is, without having that subject covered. I'm not sure about what to do on this. Of course, we only have 3 weeks.
Yeah. So, the way our subdivision rules and regs is written, A&R is submitted to the planning board.
Right.
That starts the clock. So, next meeting is in 14 days. We ask either for the revision or Norm Hill to come in.
Or tell Norm, maybe he'll want to bring another plan with him.
Well, I was fully expecting him to come because,
He knows that there's a question.
or at least someone.
Okay, but as to when this was submitted to us, March 7th, okay, we have,
The subdivision rules and says rules and regulations say an A&R plan is submitted to the planning board. So the date starts here at this meeting.
Tonight.
Yep.
Okay.
Worst case, in some ways, it's like if the board didn't sign it, it's like, well, then at least you're not,
Yeah, no,
you don't have to worry about if there's any sort of mess, the board isn't at all connected to it.
everyone agree to this course of action
Yeah, I think if we,
without objection?
if we can act on a plan that is revised to,
Or have further legal input,
yeah,
as may be required.
but yeah, so resolve the open question about the frontage.
Is there a copy of the plan down there?
We should be able to,
Sorry, I gotta.
whatever is done, we should be able to take action on it in 2 weeks, right?
Yep. So it is interesting that at least I know people are watching this meeting live, because I had just received a comment saying that a previous discussion item is a good idea.
Ah,
Oh. Okay.
Previous discussion.
It's like we should just have a runner feed as far as, you know how like when you do Facebook Live and you have like the comments. It's almost like I'm getting that by email.
Okay, it's not quite half past yet, so I guess we should do, the, request for minor modification of, special permit 1999-10.3 from, AT&T, I guess. Is someone here?
Eric Dahl, agent for AT&T Mobility, DAHL. AT&T currently has wireless installation at 244 Worcester Street. We have 9 antennas on the penthouse of the building at a height of 104 feet. The penthouse itself is 110 feet. AT&T proposes to replace 3 of those existing 9 antennas with new replacement antennas. And then on the back side of the penthouse, we have associated radio equipment. There are RRHs, surge arresters. We would like to replace 3 RRHs with 3 new RRHs and then install 3 additional RRHs. These would be installed on existing unistruts on the back of the penthouse. So the visible impact would be pretty negligible as far as what you're going to see from ground level. It's all part of AT&T's upgrading of their existing network to allow for additional users to use their phones. So we're seeking a minor modification and site plan approval.
Okay, questions? This, Joe, this fits within the new rules?
Yes. So, and we had actually, I think it was about 18 months ago, for this same facility, although it was T-Mobile, approved a very similar request at the exact same site. Same thing as far as upgrading the antennas. These are all attached to the existing structure. There's no change in the structure. Likewise, for cabinets, there's no change to any sort of footprint. Staff felt that this was consistent with our past administrative reviews, making sure that this is in conformance with the original special permit that was issued.
Okay, any questions up here? No questions up here. Does anyone have any comment on this? Out there? Not a public, this isn't a formal hearing, but, okay.
so, how about a motion? Move that the board find that this is indeed a minor modification and issue the appropriate documentation documenting the board's finding.
Well, it's a minor modification.
And
But-
approve the minor
and
modification,
approve it.
yes. We find that it is a minor modification, we approve same, and issue the appropriate documentation.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Do you have to appoint a fifth member?
No,
Is it-
because
No.
it's just administrative, so it's just simple majority.
Yeah.
Next one.
No, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted unanimously. All right, that brings me to 7:30.
So what I'll do is draft up a letter and send it to the town clerk and building department tomorrow and CC you a copy. Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
I think we now want to move to 6, and I think probably A is going to take less time, so we ought to do it first. Which is the continued hearing on 279 Upton Street. Anything for us, Joe, before?
Yep, I'll be right there. Okay, so just to give a update as far as where we are with this. Oops, where did I put it? Okay. Last night, for anyone that was staying up late, sent out the decision. There are a couple pieces of information that I had asked for some additional clarification to come in. It did come in today. One of the things that was submitted by Michael was a revised site plan reflecting conversations that I had with Bob Berger, myself, and Michael regarding the proper calculation for the parking. And then how that was used and how it was referenced within the zoning bylaw for what the zoning bylaw required. Also today, I had emailed the Fitness Asylum, one of the owners, just to get clarification, because the hours of operation, while they were a little bit broader, looking on their website, saw that other facilities weren't as broad, so identified on the town's website as Exhibit 11, received an email from Bonnie LaFrac identifying, staffing, the typical hours of operation Monday through Thursday, 5 a.m., more likely 5:30 to 11, and then 3 to 8 or 8:30. Friday, 5 a.m. to 11 and 3 to 7, and Saturday, Sunday, reduced hours as far as 6 a.m. to 11, and probably, while her email says probably depending on interest, 3 to 6 on those days as well. She also identified the range as far as the people that sometimes attend these, so at least we have a little bit more information since our last meeting to come in and finalize the decision. During our last meeting, one of the things the board asked was if it's auto sales, there should be a Class 2 license. You may have seen also on the website. I obtained the copy of the last year's Class 2 license. They were in the process of processing for this year. But it would have been the same thing, that the Board of Selectmen approve up to a certain amount. In this case, it would be up to 30. However, in the letter that is documented as Exhibit 7, that's where Ralph Cochran, the manager, identified that they were basically just only had about 5 for sale and 5 that they would be working on. And that it's reflected on that site plan. So you see the designated cars that would be associated with cars that are being worked on, ones for sale, employees, and then employees for the fitness place. I did have a condition in the draft decision that I sent to the board, basically identifying that what is on the site plan essentially is the envelope. One, you'd have to come back for any modification with the planning board. But second, any sort of use beyond where it's identified, so behind, that would actually, because it is a pre-existing non-conforming use, that would actually require going to the ZBA for expansion, because you're increasing the amount of parking beyond what is there on the ground. So, let's say the fitness center wanted to do it, we could allow through modification, but if the auto repair wanted to go into that area behind where they had parking, that would necessitate going through the ZBA, because that would be alteration and extension of a pre-existing non-conforming use. So I think over the last, since the planning board's last meeting, we wrapped a lot of these things together. I don't know, Mike, if there's anything that I missed out of that recap of the last 2 weeks.
No, I think that the the most important part was the clarifying the number of cars on the auto sales.
I looked over the draft and, I noticed that it needs proofreading.
Yeah.
There's definitely,
There's some proofreading edits, and then there's standard language, which I didn't
Yeah.
have access to. As far as being a special permit, we have standard conditions as far as time frame for recording, as well as time frame to initiate the work, and then prior to issuance of a building permit, providing us with that recording information.
and the other thing was, you're comfortable with what we have is adequately defining and limiting the question about the number of spaces and,
Yes.
particularly the used car side of it.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Are we gonna be able to approve this tonight, given that it's, we don't have a complete draft? You think?
Well, that's why I identified like that standard
Yeah,
language.
yeah.
One of the things that you could do is you could also identify one planning board member to come in and just do a once over to make sure that it's consistent with the board's vote if you wanted to. That would be absolutely a
Okay.
welcome
Yeah, sounds
thing on my part.
It does sound like all of the open issues from our discussion 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, however long ago it was.
Thankfully, only two. The time
That-
change does change our concept
Yes.
of time, so.
But the questions that we had, I think, that required additional documentation, all of the additional documentation that we were looking for has been received, correct?
Yes.
And the only thing, so at this point, I think the board is not looking for any additional information from the applicant.
No.
And if there are no further questions,
I have a question.
Okay.
In the decision,
Yep.
under findings F7, you say that the maximum class size is 20. But in fact, all documentation I've looked at has said, well, one document said 12 to 25, and some said sometimes up to 30.
So what I will have to do is with that finding, because we received that email this afternoon, that in this decision you'll notice that exhibit has not been added yet. So I'm going to specifically reference that document because that's the only thing that then we have as a written document identifying class size. So that would be at least a proposed change that I'd recommend based on the receipt of the Exhibit 11 today.
yeah, so the draft decision as it stands is incomplete. It has not been reconciled against the information that was received today,
Right,
and it is missing some standard language.
right.
And the plan as well says class size 20. This was, when I read this and I look at this,
Yep.
I say 10 parking spaces. How is that going to support 30 people?
And that's where I totally understand that. That's where the plan, because it differs, and the plan also includes the hours of operation that are not as detailed as what was submitted. So as part of a standard condition, or as a condition can be added is basically to update to reflect the hours of operation that were submitted as well as the appropriate size. Ultimately, for this type of use, the zoning bylaw requires that parking be calculated at one space per every 200 square feet of gross floor area. They did identify that range, and there may be instances where on high events that it gets above that limit. It's the same thing as far as that Stop and Shop coming in for Christmas. People may have difficulty finding parking, and that people either have to wait for someone to pull out, or maybe for things to happen that then might be something that then requires them to come back and amend the the special permit to allow for parking if it's a consistent issue. This also, they have two other locations, and if it's consistently on this, there is room on the left side that they could add additional parking and come back in front of the planning board if needed for a modification of that decision if it was something that they found was a consistent issue.
This parking calculation is an interesting class where it's not like a drugstore or something, people coming and going, rolling. It's a class ends and a class begins, I think, and there's an overlap there where there are two classes present at the same time. And so they're going to be tight up there, I think. Is there, well, for anything else from board members?
So is that gonna be a condition that the class size, maximum class size is 20?
That is that the email that was submitted is what we're referring to as far as establishing class range from 12 to 25 people.
Right, but the plan says 20,
The plan needs to be updated to reflect
30, and then again,
What
a
comes in
question I
from
have
the
as to whether 10 parking spaces could support 30, especially if you got two classes back to back. So I mean, I just think they're gonna have a major parking problem.
And then that would be something that they could either come back unless the applicant was willing to essentially establish a ceiling for the number of classes, not classes, people attending. But you could have 25 people signed up for a class and one or two are never making every single class. So the main issue that we'd have to grapple with would be recognizing the bylaw requires essentially, it was like 11 spaces. They're providing 14. It's at least acknowledged in two different documents, even though they don't match up. Those numbers are above 14. It basically becomes a question as far as whether or not the applicant is able to address that in some fashion, or that then they have to come back and modify to expand the amount of parking primarily on the left side. When you look at that site plan going in, there is room to push back that edge and have additional parallel parking.
Our responsibility is to make sure that the application complies with the bylaw. If it doesn't work, if you don't have enough parking, then you have to do something about it. But it's not our job to say, no, you can't do it because you don't have enough parking. If they have the amount of parking the bylaw says they have to have, I think that's the end of where we can say no. True?
Right, and that's where if all of a sudden it becomes an issue, there can be enforcement things as far as police or other things that if traffic is a problem, that can either be resolved by either changing the makeup of the class sizes. It could be that the number of cars that are associated with the repair and sales gets reduced to free up space there. Or they come in and they identify another error for parking.
But they have to come back to us to do that because
Yes.
of any changes in the plan.
Exactly.
So, does anyone want to comment on this application? Okay. Does the board want to take action on this tonight?
Move the board, close the public hearing.
Better, if I haven't, I'll
Yeah.
have to appoint it. This is a
Special.
special permit.
Permit.
Paul,
Paul
appoint Paul,
Paul has been present throughout the public hearing.
yes. All right, now,
Move that the board close the public hearing. And you want to deal with the draft decision separately from the motion to close?
okay. There's a motion to close the hearing. Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
Moved and seconded to close the
Speak
hearing.
up.
Discussion, hearing none, all in favor, aye, opposed, so voted. Now,
Now, I will propose a motion that the board approve the draft decision with the changes that have been noted during this discussion, subject to review by one member of the board once the decision has been completely drafted for editorial and making sure that the decision is consistent with the board's discussion and findings.
and that includes the proofreading as well
Yes.
as specifics.
Proofreading, adding in the missing pieces, making a couple of changes that were noted.
Okay. Discussion. Oh, how about a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Do we need to take a roll call, or do we know? I think we know. Okay, 4-1, the motion carries.
Okay.
Talk to him.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you. That brings us to the ridings. A request for a definitive plan approval.
So just an update, phone's at 88%, so we have plenty of
Okay, good.
battery.
Well, we also have. Which is the way it should be. Okay. We are just starting this, aren't we? So we should read a notice.
Should read a notice.
Oh, yeah. The planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 11th, 2019, commencing at 7:30 PM in Conference Room A at the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider the application for a definitive plan approval of a 39-lot flexible plan residential definitive subdivision, the Ridings, on property located at 88 Adams Road, as shown on Grafton Assessor's Map 32, Lot 10. Said property is located in low-density residential R40 zone. The applicant owner is Stephen Benicosta, Casa Investors Incorporated. Copies of the plan are available for public inspection at the Planning Department Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, or on the Town of Grafton website at www.graftonmass.gov.
Anything to start, Joe?
Just so that, for the board, there's a lot of comments that, have started to come in, and I expect that the applicant is also gonna address the status of the, conservation review. We had last seen this, well over a year ago. And, fully expect, especially because some of these issues, we're gonna need conservation's assistance, that, we're gonna be probably awaiting their submission and then bouncing back between both because of the important role not only in, reviewing resource areas, but also in, the Conservation Commission's review of the stormwater bylaw. And reconciling planning, stormwater review, and conservation in order to basically cross the finish line for this project through both reports at the same time. So hope that at least the applicant, as part of this hearing, will also give an update as far as where they are with submitting to conservation and time frame as far as trying to get these things to link up. Because I've had so many meetings, he could have done it this morning, and I may not even know.
I guess one question is, because with all of that, it's hard to say. Has anything changed, or tell us about anything that's changed since the plan that the preliminary subdivision plan, it isn't controlling, but the special permit is based on a particular plan. So if there's anything that deviates from that, I'd be interested. I didn't see a reference to the fixing the grade on Adams Road as I skimmed through this, for example.
There is actually.
Okay, well, online, it's hard to go through this. Okay, are we
So
ready?
I'd recommend just turning it over to
Okay, go for it.
Sure.
the engineer.
Mr. Chairman, my name's James Tatro. I work for Thompson Listen Associates. We're here representing Stephen Venacasa. And the subdivision is the Ridings, which evolved from the preliminary subdivision filed with you folks previously, which was also proposed to be a flexible plan, sometimes called an open space subdivision. And I'll just go through a lot of basic reference stuff that, because unfortunately there's been a long time since, as noted, since this was last before you, so everybody's on the same page with some of the basic information. We proposed 39 lots on 3 roads. One would, we're calling it Stinson Road, named for one of the longtime owners of the property, would enter from between Underwood and Hodge, if I'm saying everybody's name right, on Adams Road, would extend easterly, cross a wetland on site, continue easterly, and across the town. I'm going to move the microphone a little bit, sorry, and also cross the town line. The red that you see on this plan is the town line between Westboro and Grafton. And this would be 2,200 feet and 2,201 at the town line. We would propose 2 cul-de-sac on the north side of that, Olive Circle, which is 299 and change feet at the circle, and Randolph Circle, which is 750 feet at the circle. Again, the 39 lots are proposed under the flexible plan, allowing for reduced frontage and area. The total site is 69.77 acres. We would be devoting 42 and change acres, over 60% of the site, much more than the minimum 40% required, as open space. There would be parcels, an 8-acre parcel on the south side abutting the Mass Pike. There would be a small open space parcel behind these lots. Over here, open space parcel E. It'd be a large 32 and change, almost 33-acre parcel that encompasses all the area on the north side of the property up to the end of the property. The grades on the roads would all be well under the maximum 8% for a minor road in town. Stinson would go up at 2%, hit a local high point, down at 3%, to a low point just on the other side of the crossing, then go up at 7%, modify to 6% as it's crossing the town line into Westboro. Olive Circle would be just 2% up. Randolph Circle would be 1.75% up to a high point, 3.5% down, 3% down at a turnaround circle again. We've already conducted, we're going to have to redo, I think, 2 or 3 lots because of the change of the cul-de-sac. But we already conducted tests for all of these lots on site. Again, there's a couple that we're going to have to redo. But we did soil tests officially observed except for a couple of these now, for all these lots. The site is a wooded property, which slopes mostly at about a 15 to 20% grade down from the east to the west to a wetland in this area. And the wetland flows south to one of 2 culverts under the Mass Pike. There's a very large one in this area. There's also another large one near, just a little bit to the Grafton side of the town line. You see a wetland over here leading from Westboro into Grafton, and that goes to the other culvert that's under the Mass Pike. What else want to say? Oh, I wanted to point out the soils on site as mapped and confirmed by our soil tests were that the hill here would be a Paxton soil, a typical till, with very average quality soil. This area where I've got my hand here at the south actually was labeled as, interestingly I hadn't seen this before on the maps, as gravel pits. It was exceptionally gravelly, sandy soil. That's where we're proposing a very large infiltration basin here. There's an area in this area, an area of soil over here, which is labeled as being, it's Chatfield Hollis series soil is what they term it. It's one where you see a lot of ledge or boulders, and you did see some in that area on the property. So we did a lot of soil tests in advance of this point, and when I get to running through the waivers that we're specifically requesting, one of them is for a waiver from doing additional borings at particular intervals along the center line of the road, because we've already done actually about 90 official deep holes just off the center line of the road. The route, I don't think there'd really be much additional information gleaned from a whole series of new borings. But I want to also touch on the bigger picture, which again, we're proposing to come in from Adams Road, drop down, rise up with the grade, and connect to road in Westboro. There's another portion of property in Westboro, also owned by the applicant, where we propose to build 19 more lots. And we proposed at the preliminary stage, this is one of the changes to the plans from what you folks saw previously. This road, our main road, which is called Road A then, now Stinson Road, is the same up to about this point here, where it veered and connected. This road was what connected to the extension to Harvest Way before. And in the course of the review with folks in Westboro, there was a desire that we make, even though the Westboro town planner and our traffic engineer said this isn't really going to be a significant cut through and suck traffic from other places as people look for somehow a way to get quicker from Westboro to Grafton. But as a nod towards making it less acceptable for that anyway, what we did is we made a T intersection here, and thereby at least force anybody who's just wanting to run through to give them a little more hassle, if you will, and make it a little less desirable for that. And again, our traffic engineer does not believe that it's really going to become a cut through, but that's one change from the plan that you saw previously. Another significant change is that this cul-de-sac, which was labeled as Road C, previously on the preliminary plans was 900 feet long. And one of the items in the board's decision on the preliminary plan was that that has to be shorter. So again, we shortened that to 750 as part of this. I don't think the distance of this cul-de-sac changed at all, but that is another significant change. I think we also significantly changed the size of this basin. One of the comment items from the planner in regard to our initial filing of plans in November was that we were not using the Cornell storms, I'll call it that. Everybody's been using the same TP40 storm events for years and years now, which said your 2-year storm's 3.1, your 10 years 4.6, your 25 years 5.3, your 100 years 6.5 inches of rain in 24 hours. Well, the University of Cornell University came up with a storm sizes to use instead, which actually were significantly bigger especially at the larger storms. It's not much bigger at the 2-year storm, but in the 100-year storm, it was over 8 inches of rain in 24 hours. And the basin size that we had over here was simply not going to be adequate for that. Actually, the other basins were just fine. We actually had somewhat over-designed them. We're somewhat conservative, but that's another change from previously. You mentioned, Mr. Chairman, in regard to doing some work to lower the grade. Again, it's about 150 feet north of the proposed intersection. And if you go to sheet P1 of the plans, there's flip through as I speak. There's a note look at the very upper left corner of the plan. It says the applicant shall regrade Adams Road north of the proposed intersection to lower the local high point center to 150 feet north of the intersection approximately 1 foot to increase the available site distance. And I think that is,
Is that
what was-
P1 or PH1?
P1.
P1.
Yep. It's stuffed into the very top corner of the sheet. Top left.
Where?
And again, as you know, that was one of the desired additions or changes in the course of review of the preliminary plan.
No, I had, in the traffic report, I saw the talk about the south, but didn't mention this.
Okay. The other thing I want to, another thing I want to mention is that we did water testing. There's a hydrant in front of Mr. Underwood's house, and we had folks come out there, do the static and residual pressure test. And actually, it came out, I was pleasantly surprised, because usually your worry is you come out there and it's going to be relatively weak, and if you're proposing to extend that, how do you have adequate pressure? Do you have to do a whole new pressure booster station? And the pressure measured, it was June 26th, the pressure measured was 95%, 95 psi static pressure and with residual of 70 psi while flowing at 825 gallons a minute, which is very good in both cases.
Does the water district comment on this, or?
Their representatives were there
Okay.
at that test. I should notice.
We don't have their comment on record yet.
Yeah.
And I want to note, as one of the items that has to be dealt with here, the planner is right that there has to be coordination with the Conservation Commission's review, and there also has to be a degree of coordination with Westboro review. And while if you look at the plans, look at the profile sheets, you'll see we're proposing a hydrant on the Grafton side of the town line, and you'll see a hydrant on the Westboro side of the town line. There's no actual intent that the two mains be joined. In some hard-to-imagine hypothetical situation, the towns could theoretically attach a hose to each and join the two. Nobody really wants to do that for fear of pressure differential and what may happen. Although I must tell you that on the same day we did tests in Westboro that came out actually very similar, which again we were very pleasantly surprised. They had 100 psi where it was 95 in Grafton, but if you're going from 95 in Grafton at this elevation, you're rising quite a bit to get to that point. At 100 psi in Westboro, you're actually not rising at all overall to get to that point. So I would think that the Westboro system would have a good bit more pressure, and you'd be hesitant to connect the two unless there was some, again, apocalyptic scenario.
There isn't any interconnect option currently between Grafton and Westboro, is there?
There is no proposal to do it, but
No.
again, both water district the water district and the water department of Westboro wanted us to leave a hydrant at the end of their respective lines.
Yeah,
I just wanted to point that out.
yeah.
I also would like to just run through the waivers that we're requesting here, because there are a couple that were discussed in the course of the preliminary process, but there are also some that were added now to the list, and I want to go through each of those. One discussed in the preliminary was from section, and this is on the front page of the plans in the bottom left corner, the list of waivers being requested. From section 4.1.2.1B, which is a prohibition of cuts or fills greater than 6 feet. And we're asking for that because in the course of crossing the wetland and not having, 15-foot high walls, there's no way to come down here and then go up this grade and not either cut or fill 6 feet, just because the road, this is a 15% or so slope natural grade, whereas we can't match that with the road grade. So either we have to fill approaching it, or we would have to make a huge cut in. We're filling approaching it because we're gonna have to fill, as we cross the wetland anyway. So we're asking for a waiver in regard to that, and our reason is for the topography of the site requires it. Next one is from section 4.1.3.6, which is a prohibition against intersections being closer than 600 feet apart. Now, we've got an intersection here on the side, T-intersection of Olive Circle hitting Stinson Road, closer than 600 feet, but it's very hard to see how this small cul-de-sac with its traffic would actually interact with folks coming off here. It's still a few hundred feet away. Trying to find the exact, I believe it's more than 400 feet away. So we don't believe there's gonna be an actual traffic effect there, such as is trying to be avoided by that section of the regulations. Third one is from section 4.1.4.2 which is, D, which is, we're asking for the traveled way pavement to be 24 feet rather than 26 feet. And I would add one additional item there, which is that we propose to have a transition zone right at the town line so that the pavement in Grafton will transition to matching the pavement in Westboro. That transition's only gonna be, I think it was 50 feet, but I could tell you in a second, just a sec. Actually, it's 30 feet and 31 feet and change.
What's the width in Westboro?
It is 26, and we tried to get them to go lower than 26, and we were rebuffed, let's say. So we're looking to, so we would have a transition zone for a short distance, really just each curb widening out 1 foot over some 30 feet. But other than that, it would be a 24-foot wide traveled way. And we think it's reasonable because we don't think this is liable to be a very high-traffic road. And we think in this circumstance, it's not inappropriate.
What is your reason again for wanting it to be 24 instead of 26?
There's a lot of, one reason is, obviously, it's cheaper both for the developer initially and the town in the long term maintaining it. Another is that it's DP and Concom policy to try and have as little impervious cover as possible. A third one is that pavement widths, it used to be conceived of that if you had a wider pavement width, you created a safer traffic situation. But I think over time, there's been more realization that people drive to their feeling of comfort. And if they're presented with a 30-foot wide pavement, they drive faster because they feel, I've got all this margin for error. And if you present them with 24 feet of pavement, they drive a little slower because they don't have quite the same feeling of complete comfort. I've got all this huge, again, margin for error, if you will. So I think it's those three things, again, maybe a little skeptical of how much greater. I'll be honest, I've worked on projects where clients were suggesting going to less than 24, and I'm not really comfortable with that because, you know, we're losing our snowbanks now, but in a situation where you've got the whole winter full of, you know, snow, then cold, then snow, then cold, and the banks keep building up, I don't think less than 24 feet gives you an adequate two-car passing distance when you've got a bad, you've had a bad winter and you've had a big buildup of snow on the side.
Do we know the width of Adams Road,
Oh, it's
the traveled portion of Adams Road width in that area?
I don't have a specific measurement and a specific point off the top of my head, but I believe it's less actually than 24. The audience nods their agreement.
We like it that way. Try walking your dog.
Yeah, are there sidewalks in
We
the development?
We propose a sidewalk on one side all throughout. It's on the north side of the main road because that's where the two cul-de-sac are. And on the cul-de-sac, it gets around to the end of the circle to entrance to open space, and again, around the end of the circle to entrance to open space, and I'll touch on the open space trails and.
Is that sidewalk part of the 24 feet?
No, that's, you have
In
24
addition.
feet, then you have a grass plot, and then you have the sidewalk. The 24 feet is from bottom of curb to bottom of curb, and I'm actually, one of the next items is, in regard to the curbs.
Yeah, that's, I wanted to get to that,
Okay.
because that's, the less, upright, hard granite, and the more sloped out, the safer I feel on a narrow road. You know,
I agree.
if I have to swerve over and it's a vertical granite curb, I'm not, my car's not gonna make out too well.
You feel like you're gonna get your tire cut.
On the other hand, Adams Road and George Hill Road and all those kind of work because you can go off the pavement. It's just,
Into a tree.
some amount, depending.
We have no curb, but we have rather, along some parts of those roads, some parts of George Hill particularly, we have some rather sharp drop-offs
Yeah,
off the
yeah.
edge of the, sometimes not even off the edge of the pavement.
And trees growing back. But anyway, but that's
That's a whole other story.
part of when I look at it, question.
The next item of waivers is asking for is from section 4.1.6.3, which is a restriction of dead-end length to 500 feet. Again, we're asking for 750 on this cul-de-sac. Again, we presented at the preliminary, a cul-de-sac with a length of 900, and the sentiment we received back from the board was that they wanted that to be shortened, and this is, again, cutting 150 feet off that. It is still, though, asking for a waiver from that particular section of the regs.
By the time we get to a decision, the makeup of the board is going to be different than, most likely, than we have, and the question is going to be eligible voters in terms of looking back to that previous, what we all talked about back then, because she's not running, he's running. He's not going to try to run for. So right now, we have 3, and if Mike doesn't miss any other meetings and he does
The mill.
a review, then we'd have 4, so we have to have 3 yes, so
Okay,
it is, just be aware of that.
okay, point taken. The next one is from section 3.3.3.20, which is a requirement to show all trees greater than 12-inch diameter at 4 feet height. And we ask for a waiver from that because there's, on the smaller lots with the septic systems, there's really not a whole lot of discretionary calls about where you're gonna grade and where you're not going to grade. And knowing that there's a 18-inch maple right here is nice, but it's not, there's not a whole lot we can do about it in the context of grading on with these lots. So we would ask for a waiver from that one. The next one is from sections 4.2.1 and 4.2.2. This is the curbing. The subdivision regs call for a combination of vertical granite curbing and Cape Cod berm. And we would ask, the applicant is asking to use sloped granite curbing everywhere. And I think it's a better option, honestly, again, for piggybacking on the suggestion that you're describing, is that you're driving along with the vertical granite curbing. There's always a little bit of a feeling of, if I ever, touch the curb, am I going to blow out a tire because there's a granite edge that I hit?
So you're saying, the Cape Cod berm becomes
Everything.
sloped granite?
Everything.
Okay, so the only vertical granite would be at catch basins or that?
Yes,
kind of thing.
the header, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, you kind of have to have vertical granite right around there, but everywhere else, if it's sloped granite,
I think it's actually the most attractive one anyway. And I think all of it being the slope granite would look better than a combination of, as literally prescribed in the regs, of the vertical and the Cape Cod. The next one is from section 3.3.4.4, the requirement for test pits, borings or soundings at specific intervals along the center line of the road. And again, every house that you see on here, I think with the exception of a couple on this cul-de-sac, which its location changed, every one of them, there were deep holes dug. So, I mean, all along the length of this road, we have a very good idea of the soils on site. We have a very good idea of where there may be any ledge, which again is really only kind of in this area. From all of these soil tests and additional borings at specific distances along the center line of the road wouldn't impart more meaningful information at this point. Is why we would ask for a waiver from that one. And finally, the last one is from section 5.5, the requirement for concrete sidewalks. The applicant would ask to do BCI sidewalks instead. And the one other thing I was going to mention, responding to the board member's question, is in regard to the open space. And I wanted to just point out a couple things. What you see on the site, you see some very thick dashed lines and some very thick solid lines through the areas that are designated as open space. And the very thick solid lines are existing trails, both in Grafton, and we continue. You see it also in Westboro. And what we would have is a trail connecting to the end of Olive Circle, going across the wetland, joining existing trail, gets around this detention basin, again back to existing trail. You'd have off the end of Randolph Circle a new trail connecting up just above this to existing trail, and it's actually just into Westboro, but you'd have some parking spaces here and a new trail connecting again to existing trail. And there's, I'll get the areas wrong, besides the almost 33 acre open space parcel here in Grafton, adjoining it is a 39, almost 40 acre parcel of open space area here in Westboro, and this connects to a couple of open space parcels north of the applicant's land in Westboro. There's the Libby land and the I forget the exact name of the entity of forestry.
Sudbury Valley Trustees.
Well, Sudbury Valley, and I was going to get to that. Sudbury Valley Trustees is the entity we intend to transfer this open space parcel, the almost 33 acre to, and they're going to, I believe, end up managing the adjacent land in Westboro. And they were chosen because they've got a great track record of doing good maintenance and taking care of these things, and taking it seriously, not just having a tax item on their books. And so, again, the site total is 69.77 acres, and we're going to be, we're designating 42.75 acres, over 62% of the site, as open space. And again, the requirement under in the regs is 40%. So he's exceeding it by quite a bit. The only other thing I want to touch on, and I apologize that it's just off the sheet here, but I wanted to plot this as at a scale where everything could be seen reasonably, and if somebody asked me, I could look at a number and see it. Just off the sheet here, as part of the site, you'll see on sheet L4 of the plans what's designated as parcel G. That's at the extreme north end. And that's a parcel of land that, frankly, our surveyor is kind of upset at us for. He is quite adamant. He says that's the applicant's land, but we said, look, there's a contention that and a butter says it's his land. It doesn't do anything for us. We're already exceeding the minimum open space. If this was the applicant's land, he would simply be calling it more open space, and instead of having 62% open space, he'd have 65, whatever the number is. It's not worth a fight, and that parcel G, 2 and change acres, we're designating as to be conveyed to the abutter. we're not, basically, we don't want to fight, and there's no reason for it, and so I just wanted to point that out. I'm sure there's stuff I intended to talk about and forgot, and I'm sure there's questions you have, so I guess I'll just try and answer what questions is you might have.
Okay, questions from the board?
I do notice that Graves has started looking at this and has a bunch of stuff.
One more thing, in response to Joe's question in regard to the Conservation Commission, we filed on Friday morning, the notice of intent with the Conservation Commission. So that process has started.
Did they identify a hearing date?
I don't believe so. Actually, we're waiting to hear that.
Okay, so one of the things, and reason why I brought it up is that I'd be recommending at least continuing this for a month.
Oh, yeah.
That then puts us April 11th. A month later,
Is it
we then have the elections. So I do think that there needs to be a serious conversation, especially on your end. You would only have 4 members that would be available going through the remainder of the hearing. If you wanted to maintain a board of 5, then we'd be looking at really continuing after that election date to then make sure that, because we will have 1 new member, that'll be for certain. So in order to make sure that they're eligible, that would require advertising, re-advertising for that hearing.
Okay.
So timing of conservation, their hearing, revising plans, we're then getting close to there.
Yeah.
So even if we had another session, we'd be re-advertising anyways. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of stuff here from Graves already, so.
Yeah, and one of the things that we have to also look at is the open space and all of that. I was contacted by SVT to talk about, well, would the town take it, but then they have some sort of agreement for managing the open space with them. So without a conservation agent, I have to work with the chair.
That's right.
I'm meeting with her tomorrow on a couple things, so this is going to be one of those things I'm going to raise. So there's a lot of things up in the air that it doesn't mean that we're not working and checking these things off. It's just that come May, we basically do have to re-advertise. Unless you want to proceed with only 4 going forward until...
No, it's not that big of a deal to re-advertise. We've done that on other projects before. So.
including this one.
Yeah.
Okay, but we are proceeding now, and we have many people who are either here for this or the bill signing.
That always brings them out.
The discussion item about temporary signs, maybe. Does anyone at this point have any comments or questions? Please come to a mic so that we can hear you. Identify yourself.
Hi, my name's Tracy LaFlamme. I live at 113 Adams Road. My question is the walking trails. Where specifically are they going to end? Because our property line is right above there, and we don't want people on our property walking through there thinking it's a walking trail.
Well, we can actually, they're shown on all the grading plans where the trails are, and if you bear with me just a second here. The nearest trail to your property looks to be at least a couple 100 feet short. It's an existing trail. We're not proposing to go any north of that. Actually, I'll leave it. You can take this with you if you'd
That's
like.
okay.
At least that just reminds me because that is an extremely handy plan, seeing it all together. If we can get a copy of that so that it's part of our record, and then that way, if I have to pull things on the screen,
I will.
next
I'll
meeting.
scan this and send it to you as a PDF tomorrow morning.
great, thanks. And at least any revisions
This is
get included on that full size.
Yeah, okay,
line,
yep,
and this is the existing trail. This,
okay. And then it
the-
curves here and then
Yep.
comes down
Right.
and then goes into Westboro? Okay,
And it goes in Westboro, goes up, and does, you can actually see the, from the,
Okay.
the ripples in the contours, that's where the trail is running.
Okay, I see.
And we're not proposing to go anything north of that trail.
Okay,
The existing trail is the solid line.
okay,
What we're proposing to add is the dashed pieces. So the nearest trail to you are what's there now.
okay,
We're not proposing any addition.
okay, okay, thank
But
you.
it's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
And please,
I can take it?
oh, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Jeff Underwood, 86 Adams Road. Just a couple of comments, if not questions. One with regard to the water pressure, which I did witness. It was pretty impressive. However, I would offer as a possible explanation for that is that when they put the water lines in, very few of the existing residences tied into the water line. I don't know how many are tied in now, maybe one or two on actually in Adams Road. I didn't know if that might contribute to some of the pressure, but that's just a comment. With regard to the road width, going from 24 or 26 to 24 feet, there was a comment, and I'm not sure which road you were referring to, about not being a high traffic road. I'm not sure either what defines a high traffic road, but having lived on Adams Road for 44 years, I've seen the traffic increase considerably to the point that, as somebody mentioned before, it's difficult to walk dogs. It's, I mean, you cross the street to get your mail, you're waiting for, especially during commuting hours, so the morning and the afternoon, it's pretty high and fast traffic, which sort of leads me to my other point. And I can appreciate the road structures for the new development with the sidewalk on one side and the curbings and all of that seems pretty reasonable. However, you're putting 39 lots in there, call it 40 houses, that's probably 80 additional vehicles. We've got some significant traffic on Adams Road now. We're going to be dumping more traffic onto Adams Road. Bottom line is, and I don't know how much a responsibility you might bear for this, but just to make it a point, what is the effect going to be on Adams Road? It's a very narrow road. It's bordered in many cases by stone walls, which are very difficult to do anything with. So I guess just thinking ahead, once this development is up and fully occupied, the impact on the traffic on Adams Road is something that I would ask everybody to consider. You mentioned BCI sidewalk. I'm not sure what BCI means.
It's essentially pavement,
It's like asphalt?
yes.
Okay. Is that more substantial than concrete, or is it have a better life, or what's the advantage or disadvantage?
There's pluses and minuses each way. The concrete in general will endure more. You can have problems with the concrete to a degree that you don't have with the pavement with frost heaves. The concrete is also a lot more expensive both to be installed and to be replaced at some point down the line. So there's pluses and minuses each way.
Okay. And then I guess my final comment has to do with the actual intersection, the tie-in, which is where I live on that corner. And I think at one of the previous meetings, we talked about the radius and what the turn effect would be coming onto Adams Road. And I don't know if that was resolved or if it was expanded or reduced. But I suppose that one of the tests may be, can fire apparatus make that turn? Can school buses make that turn into the easily at that intersection?
Well, through the chair, that's actually one of the points of the Graves review letter that I actually wanted to discuss with Jeff Walsh, the reviewer from Graves, which is that he says, well, gee, you've got about a 42 or 45 foot radius on the pavement here at your couple proposed intersections, and he expressed a desire that it be lower, be 30, and part of the desire to have it be the 42 or 45 is exactly what Mr. Underwood, the question he's raising is that you're actually getting more feedback from the state fire marshal and from different fire departments asking you to show that they can drive their truck around the corner without having to veer a tire plus worth into the other lane. And if you have a small, it isn't small for a car, but small for a fire truck, 30-foot radius, a lot of times you're actually sort of forcing that. And so the peer reviewer says he'd rather see 30 miles an hour for 30 foot, for a couple reasons. I'd probably rather see the larger radius, and that's something that has to be kind of hashed out as to which value do we want to try to be promoting with either the smaller or the larger radius. I'd rather see, actually, like as Mr. Underwood says, I'd rather see the larger, but that's something yet to be fixed.
What's your radius at Adams?
We're stuck a little bit. I have to check.
45 it says here, curb radar approximately 45.
No, she's got it. Thank you. Okay, and actually, for most fire trucks, the standard that you'll get is that the truck they're using needs, I think it's a 41 or a 42 foot inside radius that it's going. You're going around a curve this way, that curb has to have at least a 41 foot radius for the truck to stay completely on its side and not have to have like swerved over to the other lane and then come in or cut over onto the other side once it's into the subdivision. So we actually wanted to use the larger radii. Again, the reviewer is suggesting that there are reasons to prefer lesser. I disagree with him that those reasons are convincing. I think that
I hope we'll see if we get any input from the fire department. Thing is that all our streets, for the most part, are built, well, at least the ones that come through us, have always been the 30-foot
Right.
radius. Usually people don't want more than that because it takes land.
It's been a big push
frontage.
now with the fire marshal, and in a couple of towns. Actually, it's actually interesting. In Westboro, one of the comments we got through the preliminary process was a complaint from the fire department where that we showed it was either 41 or 42 foot radius, and he specifically wanted it to be larger so that he could be sure that he could get the truck around and the truck would stay on its side of the street.
You know, when the fire truck comes with all the lights and the siren and whatnot, usually people get out of the way, no matter which lane you're in.
I was just at sometimes I was just at an intersection in Shrewsbury this past weekend, and somebody did not get out of the way of an ambulance. I don't know if he was so engrossed in his damn phone or what it was, but.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Points taken.
On the Adams Road, again, I couldn't read all 3,000 pages of the traffic report well enough to get it. Do you have in mind the existing trips per day on Adams Road and how the split goes, how much you're contributing to that?
I'm sorry, I don't have that off the.
It's because it looked, I think I remember a number, but I couldn't tell whether it was a split number or the whole subdivision. They were talking about 600 cars. And I thought I saw Adams Road was in the 1,000 range. So the point being that you're making quite a contribution to Adams Road.
That strikes me as the entire
Right.
thing, because the old number that I used to have in my head was that a single-family home was 10.6
Yeah.
vehicle trips per day.
Right.
So 58 total homes might have 10.6 is, just over 600. And that would be, they would not all be coming out to Adams Road in Grafton. Some would be leaving via Harvest Way, even some of the homes in Grafton.
Yeah, well, we need to have what the engineer thinks is the split.
Yep.
So we know.
It's
what
in the
we're
report somewhere. I apologize. I just don't know it off the top.
But in any, even if it's 300 cars, and if I was right, I'm remembering 1,000 or so on Adams Road now, that's 30% increase. So it is pretty significant. Should be aware of that. Think about it.
Point taken.
Anything else from out here?
I guess I have to.
Okay, come on down.
I'm a Yankees fan.
Tell us who you are.
I am Ron Hogue from 90 Adams Road. I have a few questions. There is gonna be a cut through West, right? From Grafton, those new houses? There'll be a road going through?
The
Cut
road will
through?
go from Adams Road between you and Mr. Underwood out to connect to an extension of Harvest Way in Westboro, and then out.
So they'll be cutting through that way too?
Who is the day?
People in Westboro, they'll be coming through Adams Road? Yes,
Well,
they like the quick, to get where they wanna go. That's a fact everywhere you go. Everybody cuts through. People cut through gas stations because it's faster. Same thing there. But anyways, next one?
Sure.
Okay. You said there's not a lot of shale up there.
say it again.
There's not a lot of shale?
Meaning ledge?
Excuse me, in the ledge, yeah.
No, the only ledge we had was in the area over here behind you, and actually no, this was in the gravel. So, which is what the soil map said, was that the only area of Chatfield Hollis soil was, you know, your lot, the folks a little bit north of you. I don't know if I don't know if Mr. Underwood, on the back of your property, you have some ledge. Or?
We have actually in the front of our property.
Okay. Okay. But we did, but sir, we dug some 90 deep holes through the site, and except for, again, the area right behind you, we didn't have ledge anywhere. There were no ledge, there's no ledge hit on any of the deep holes on this road coming down here, not on these two lots on the south side. It was really just behind you is where we saw some.
Excuse me if I may, just,
But you gotta be at a microphone.
sorry.
No,
Come on, I'll share it with you.
Just a quick point with regard to the ledge. I don't know where the ledge is, but I'll tell you this. Mass Pike crosses Adams Road.
Yep.
When trucks go over that bridge and it hits whatever they do, they bounce.
Yeah.
We feel it in the house shakes. So that tells me that there's ledge south of me.
Yeah.
Down to wherever the pilings have gone down for the.
Sure.
I've never seen anybody drill holes in. Have you? But anyways, I get water in my basement now. When you build all those houses, it's gonna be even worse.
Well,
I mean, I have a sump pump, but if I lose my electricity, all the runoff is gonna be even worse.
I would suggest you probably have what's called a perched water table, which is water table sitting on ledge. We're not sending water to you. You know, this street here is draining over to this infiltration basin. Oh, excuse me, to this infiltration basin. There's no surface water being sent to you, and there's no reason to expect that anything is going to contribute to your groundwater table.
I can't believe you, but I respect your right to say it. I mean, you're gonna get it sooner or later. And as my neighbor was saying, the noise we get now, he's saying vibrations, we get noise from the Mass Pike. And if you cut down trees and all that stuff, you're gonna be even more noise. Maybe they could put a barrier up there for us if you get the okay. I didn't think so.
I think the
That's a
turnpike.
state thing.
You know, if
a
somebody
state.
has a lot of money, they can, but I think the turnpike some years ago said they'd build their last sound wall.
Yeah, in Natick probably. And, all right, the cut through, you are gonna have a cut through, right? The Westboro. I don't like that, but that's not me to say. Are the houses gonna be ugly like the other ones in Grafton that they build? Are they? I don't know, do we have any say in that?
No,
Are they gonna be ugly houses? Yes. Right down the street from it, there's all ugly houses, the big
No,
houses are
no.
ugly. They are ugly.
okay.
They are ugly.
Do you have anything else?
What could I possibly say?
I'm all set. Thank you.
That reminds me,
Yeah.
on traffic studies, this very rarely has come up, but did the traffic study or does the traffic study say anything about getting traffic being generated from where we're connecting to? Some of the Westboro people might come through, and is that included in the analysis, and would it make any difference?
Yeah, I mean, I'll
I think
take
would
a
it make
look.
a
I think one of the things that the past, when we dealt with this at the major residential special permit, was that, and just because I actually, I guess I could have done it. Essentially, when you look at Harvest Way down here on the map, they're coming in to this area, and then we're coming across. The past traffic studies basically indicated that for Westboro residents, that there wasn't any time savings coming up Adams Road in Grafton versus going Adams Street. To then, majority of the movements are still eastbound. So you're going west to go north to go east, versus just east and north to connect to West Main Street in Westboro. I'll take a look at the traffic study to see if that's broken out a little bit.
Yeah,
more.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, that was a big point of discussion in our preliminary review in Westboro, where some of the folks in Westboro, how could I most charitably characterize
Right.
their objections? Worried that the unwashed of Grafton would all be desiring to come through to see Westboro, which they could only vaguely hope to imagine the wonders of.
You realize we're streaming live on the internet
Yes.
right now, and people over in Westboro are,
Well,
This is all public record.
I'm being kind to the nature of their commentary, and our traffic engineer, was there at a couple different meetings, Jennifer Conley, and she heard this the first time. She said, look, I've looked at the road network. I just don't see it as yes, you're always going to have some people going each way, but she said, I just don't see it as a big cut through use, because there's not a destination you can get to so much better that a lot of people in each town. It's not viable it's not that the folks from Grafton say, oh wait, here's the way to get to wherever it is in Westboro. It's like, well, if you're on Adams Road and you're heading north, just keep going and then take the right. Rather than taking the right here, going to this T intersection, going out Harvest Way, taking a left onto Appleseed, going to Appleseed to the end of Adams, then taking a left again, and then taking a left. You've got to make like 5 different turns, and the roads aren't appreciably better in Westboro. Adams Street in Westboro is not a dream either.
No.
I remember we had some discussion on this topic back during the special permit / preliminary
Yeah.
design
Yeah.
review. And I will just note that, just glancing at the traffic report a little bit, the traffic study here included with this application does mention some traffic counts at Harvest Way and Appleseed and Westboro. So there it appears to at least somewhat take into account. Well, obviously we'll want to look at the traffic study in more detail to try to get a better feel for, is there something that the traffic study didn't cover sufficiently to address some of these questions about through traffic?
Yeah, sure. And the town planner, Joe's analog, or not doppelganger, he doesn't look like you. Just the analogous, the town planner in Westboro, after a couple of, again, this being raised at a couple different meetings, said, to the folks there, look, I understand your concern, but I don't see it either. He agreed with
There is an
the
egress
engineer.
that I could see happening, but it would be coming out of that, people who lived in that, coming out of that, making a left onto Adams Road. Because if you do that, you can actually get out to 140 and come across, God help us, George Hill Road at 90 miles an hour. And you can get again to 140 to head towards south. If you're going down towards EMC or whatever it's called now, towards that whole region on 495. and that is actually now a cut through.
With the exception that it's faster to go North Street through Westboro to do that exact same motion. So we have a lot of like parallel roadways
I know.
within each town to sort of connect to then get over to that area.
But if you lived in that area, actually it's still quicker to go out and go down and go through Meadowbrook and get out to 140. That's really pretty quick.
Here they have to go around to the east, swing up, and then come back
Yeah.
west to get to where they
Yeah.
are by just going out to Adams Road and up. So I think for some destinations,
You can see that.
westish, I guess it is,
But
there would be a,
But that's going to
possible
be a
savings.
rabbit warren back there, and most people aren't going to want that as a cut through going eastbound.
yeah, well, that might be, all the twists and turns
Mm-hmm.
to get out that direction versus less twists and turns to go out Adams Road.
Right, and again,
Particularly if you're headed to the
as I said early on, in response to this issue being raised in the course of the Westboro review, we changed the configuration of things here
Yeah.
such that anybody doing through traffic had to go through at least one T intersection, where, again, before, this just went from this point about here, it cut a little further to the south and connected to the extension of Harvest Way, and then this cul-de-sac just branched off of that. And the creation of that T intersection was just to show something that is being done to make it to discourage a little bit.
The curvature also discourages driving fast through there. Unfortunately, Adams Road. people
It's another
think it's
reason,
a
actually,
speedway.
for the 24-foot wide pavement instead of wider, is that if this was 26, or I know that 26 is the town standard, but if it was even wider, then that, again, gives that perception of ease of driving and speed, that it would be would more encourage people to cut through.
Okay. Well,
Other comments? He stood up before you.
Linda Underwood, 86 Adams Road. Going back to the trails, are those going to be open to the public?
Yes.
Has the projected traffic been accounted for? When you're talking about how many cars are coming in and out, and especially it would be on the weekends, I'm sure, and school vacation times.
Yeah, I believe that is in the traffic report, but I'd have to confirm that. Again, I don't have a copy with me here.
Okay,
So,
that would be the only thing I need. One other thing actually is where Stetson Road is going to come out on Adams Road. How much wider are you making that down there? I see some wooden stakes with orange on the top.
sure. Well, again, I'm sorry, is Carol Tidman. You said we had a 45-foot radii. Was that it? Are there?
That's what you proposed, yes.
Okay, so 45 and 45, and then 24. That's 114 feet from very edge of
But
pavement
will
touching to very edge of pavement touching.
And
But
there's
the
enough
actual
property
road,
there to do that? There's enough land there to do that?
once you get into the right of way, the town-owned road, you can make those pavement connections. You can't cut across anyone's property.
Right.
Yours or
Yeah,
Mr. Hodge
yeah.
on the other side. By the way, is it, am I correct saying Hodge? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we had,
Jeff David, 113 Adams Road. Getting back to the traffic in the study where you said on Adams was about, what was it, 1,000?
I, don't quote me,
It was, well, if you put 39 houses in, the average person's gonna be young adults, children, doing sports, going to the store. That's gonna increase tenfolds over because they're gonna be running the kids back and forth to the sporting events, to the school. That's gonna make that traffic on that street a lot more.
that was the number we were talking about. There's a standard engineering procedure,
Yep.
the traffic engineers, say for a single-family home like this, they get 10.6, trips per day. And that's more or less what you were just saying.
Yeah, does that
so-
include, like I said, the sport, like,
Well, that's, well,
If I, through the chair, that number has been generated over, and first of all, a disclaimer, I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't do traffic reports, but seeing enough of them over the years for different projects, one of the few things that is stuck in my head is that the number that the International Traffic Engineers Society has generated is, and settled on, is 10.6 trips per day for the average single-family home. Now, that includes some homes where it's, mom and dad, and they're going to, 3 different soccer games and a dance recital, and that includes mom and dad and 1 kid where there's 1 car. It's an average. Obviously, there are some of those heavy, car use homes taken into that, but they've worked up that number over decades. And that's what they've sort of settled on again, is that 10.6 trips per day. And now that also includes, if the UPS truck comes and delivers the Amazon package to the
because
to a
the
home.
Amazon now and going into a development like that, you're gonna have the vans going left and right.
But if the van comes up Adams Road, takes a turn, delivers to a package to lot number 2, it goes over, delivers to a package to lot number 32, et cetera, goes out to Westboro, that's 1 trip. Because a vehicle coming into the development, that's 1 trip.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay, I just
that.
wanna.
No, we walk our dog all the time on Adams Road, and you're taking your life in your hands. Now you're adding that much more traffic onto that street, and the way Adams Road is, it's like just stone wall, trees, breaks right off. You got nowhere to go, and we're walking the dog. They fly. It's ridiculous on that street, the traffic and the speed, and then you add that, it's ludicrous.
We all feel that way, George Hill Road. It's worth your life to go out there just because of the road surface.
Yeah, it's not flat. It's, and then if you do fix it, they're gonna go faster.
Yeah, but
He made us right there, that man.
No. So.
Yeah, I just wanna make,
We're not unaware of your concern.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did I have somebody else back there?
Yeah.
Good evening, my name's Kevin Farley, I live at 93 Adams Road, and I have a few questions. You mentioned the water tests that were performed. Can you share with me a little bit about the process? How deep were those holes?
Well, it sounds like there's 2 different things. Water tests were a test of the hydrants in front of Mr. Underwood and another one further up the road.
The town water?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, as far as holes, we did holes all throughout the site per Title V, which is you're doing.
For septic?
Yes.
Okay.
Because which I didn't make a point of in the process of the presentation, but these lots are all going to be served by septic systems. And we did on every one of these lots, and now a couple of them we have to redo because the cul-de-sac changed. We did 2 deep holes and a perk test on each of these lots. The deep holes varied. I'm sure they were all at least 8 feet deep, but a couple of them were probably deeper.
You didn't mention perk specific, so I didn't.
Oh, we
catch
did.
that,
We did the
so I
perks as well.
apologize.
Yes.
And your plan is to have town water supplied to these homes?
Correct.
Okay.
Or let's be technical. The Grafton Water District technically is not the town. I used to be a Grafton resident, so I was mystified by this the first time I found it out.
The organization that provides water to most of Grafton, you will intend
Yes.
to tap into. Okay.
Yes.
Can you then tell me, from the Stetson-Adams Road intersection, how far in do you anticipate having to blast in feet from there?
I don't know, my experience with ledge from both having observed and supervised the digging of deep holes in areas that were found to have ledge is that you have a rough idea where ledge is when you've done some holes, but you don't really know.
So I said
And
anticipate.
I would suggest that I'm gonna pick the plan up to be able to see the stations a little better, that probably there's at least a chance of it till station 4+00, 400 feet in is just past this proposed intersection. I'd say there's a chance of it till station 3+50, which is about where I've got my pen.
But is that about 150 feet from Adams Road?
Oh, no, that's, when I say 3+50, it's 350.
Okay, it's 350 feet.
I'd say there's a chance. As to specific likelihood, I couldn't tell you, and really nobody can, because ledge is so variable.
The reason why I ask is I have a well, it's 485 feet down.
Yep.
And with all of the development of the Highfields, Valley View, and Bridle Ridge homes that are on wells, I recently had to frack my well because it became a low yielder.
Yep.
And I'm somewhat concerned about any kind of blasting and what that will do to ultimately my well, because I'm selfish.
Sure.
And I don't know if there's a recourse, if there's a way to track if my well, which was working fine after blasting, doesn't.
I know, through the chair, I know that one of the requirements before doing any blasting is the term is a pre-blast survey, and I don't know how far out you are required to go in that. The pre-blast survey is you're going to all the adjacent properties, and again, I'm not sure how far out.
Well, I'm directly across from the intersection.
Yep. And you've got to,
And there's F
and you do, it's both for to the benefit of the other party, and it's, quite frankly, it's for the benefit of the person or the entity doing the blasting, so that the person can't say they had a Ming vase in their home, which suddenly.
Oh, right, like the house on Adams Road when they blasted.
Yeah.
You know,
For Robin.
so I guess if you, after this hearing is closed, if you give me your name and number, I'll give you mine as well, and I can tell you, I'll look into it and see, try and confirm that they would do a pre-blast survey and you wouldn't be included in it.
Because I believe my well cap is about 60 feet inland from Adams Road.
Okay, so your
And-
septic system is in the back?
The septic system is in the front.
Oh, okay, it's
Septic
supposed
is
to-
in the front. The well is in the back.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and the Adams-Stinson intersection is probably 60 feet linear towards the north before you get to the intersecting line for my well.
Okay.
Okay, then the other question is on Adams Road, the hump.
Yeah.
The
You're talking to the north of the intersection.
correct.
Yeah.
And I think the-
Me particularly, but we beat on that pretty hard during the previous
it's about
process.
300 feet from the intersection through the two houses
Actually,
that are affected.
we, as part of the preliminary review, sir, actually, the chairman was particularly adamant that we take a look at the local high point just north of this. Actually, it's about 150 feet north is what it turned out to be. And while an initial look at available site distance didn't seem to say that was necessarily a problem, the applicant agreed that he would knock that down about a foot to improve site distance of both people coming out here and people coming from the north. That is on the plans. It's on one of the.
Okay, now if that were to occur, directly in front of my house is that big 3-foot diameter oak tree. Is that in danger of being
On
killed
which side?
on the western side,
On your side.
on my side?
You're not going to touch trees on the western side.
Is it? Let me ask you: is it in the right of way or is it on your property?
It's on the right of way.
Okay. I can't say for certain that there wouldn't be an effect. Although we're only going down 1 foot, I would suspect that there's not going to be an issue, but I can't guarantee that to you.
All right. Well, I do have some concern on that, but
If it's in the right of way, isn't that under the tree or
The
under
town.
the town? And that's something that they need to really make sure that the guy deals
Well,
with trees
Plus,
and
plus
a scenic
Adams
road.
is a scenic road.
you have to
It's a
see the road.
So
We get to, we
they get
get
sensitive.
that comes to us
Yeah.
if that tree does need to be dealt with.
Okay.
I think it'll be a while before we really know the engineers look.
Yeah.
My first meeting here where I'm actually asking some questions.
Good.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Come on.
Come on down.
All right, my last question, Tracy Flan, 113. I just had a question. Can I
Sure,
point to the map?
sure.
Okay, see this area here? I know you were saying this area here, the water runoff's gonna kind of like come down here, and you had like some area where the water was gonna go. For this
Oh.
area up here, this is so much higher.
Yeah.
My concern is with all the water up here, like we have land that's across the street over here, and we already have some water issues. What is the plan for the water that's gonna come up
Well-
here? Where's that gonna run?
The area north of this
Yep.
is going to keep going where it goes now, which is to this wetland. That's where we're sort of cutting it off.
Okay,
This street, there's a high point right here
Okay.
where part of it goes this way. The rest of it is going this way to the end of the circle, to this basin, which again is going to discharge into this same wetland, which flows down this way.
okay,
So it's part of everything that is flowing to this wetland now
Yep.
that goes down south and eventually would go under this proposed road
okay,
and to the Mass Pike. Everything is still going to go that way.
okay.
Nothing is being directed to the other side of the wetland to,
Okay.
if you have
So
proper,
it's all kind of going this way.
if your property is on the other side, the west side of this wetland,
Yep.
there's nothing that should get to it, that is in the future that is not getting to it now, which should only be a little bit, I guess I would think of, I'm not sure where because this is only 106.
Right, but we have land over here, and we
yeah.
already have sometimes issues where people put houses up, and then the water comes down, it comes over here, and it floods the other side of
Yeah.
the field. So I was just concerned when I saw this all up
Sure.
here, where that was gonna.
I mean, if you want to
go.
think of it this way, starting from behind number 94,
Yep,
all of this land on the west side of the wetland is going to be untouched.
okay,
So,
right,
starting from 94, the land on the east side, yes, there will be development, but this is going to drain and be sent into this wetland that flows south,
okay.
eventually
So
to the
this
Mass
is all in that
Pike.
area right here then? is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
This green, the darker green here,
Okay.
that's colored in is all wetland.
Yep,
And we're not, again, once you get north of the house at 94, there's nothing being proposed on this side,
okay,
the west side of the wetland.
okay, all right, thank you, I
No,
appreciate it.
no, it's a reasonable question.
Okay, anybody else?
Erin Farley, 93 Adams Road. I just have one quick question. On the trails that will be being built, are those going to be maintained? Or are they just going to be put in and then?
Sure. The reason actually that we're partnering with Sudbury Valley Trustees is that they have a great record of maintaining the trails. And the trails are going to be a combination of being created and already there. What we show on the plans, which your neighbor has the has the plan set, but I can show you here, is that we show some very thick dash line of new trail and very thick solid line is the existing trail on site. And it's going to be, the trails on site will be a combination of the existing network, which we used in part for bringing the machine in to get into areas to do soil testing. It's going to be a combination of those existing trails and some new ones so that we can connect the end of this cul-de-sac and get to that trail network, and the end of this cul-de-sac, and it's just off the sheet, and get to the trail network, and a few parking spaces in Westboro, and create some new trail to get to the existing trail network. So it's a combination of existing and proposed. And again, the reason that Sudbury Valley Trustees has been brought into this is that they do have a great record of maintaining the trails.
So it won't fall to the town to maintain the trails, it'll be
No.
the very town.
No.
And then another question regarding the water in the area. Will residents on Adams Road have the option to hook up to the water that's being brought into the new development?
The water will be in Adams
no.
Road.
Yeah, it's already, what we're gonna do, there's already a water line, I'll place my pen, on the, east side of Adams Road. We're just gonna connect to that. We're not bringing water line north or south from here, and we're not creating new stubs, where, if any, don't exist for the existing properties at, you know, at 90, 92, 94, 96, 98, or on the other side. We're not, so I think the ability to connect is already there. If there's not already a stub there, which is it's a significant part of making the connection, we're not going to be providing those for folks already on Adams Road.
Okay. So, thank you.
One final question, Jeff Underwood, 86 Adams Road. The trails, will they prohibit or allow mechanized vehicles? Four-wheelers?
I don't believe that they are allowed, but I didn't specifically ask that question because I had a little discussion with Steve Sloan of Sudbury Valley Trustees about what they do for trail maintenance. And at least as I understood it, it was not being set up to allow. Now, as a caveat to that, some of these trails are already very wide. You know, we drove an excavator up this trail. But we're not proposing to create, you know, road width, vehicle width trails. It's for walking, for passive recreation. It's not for,
What about horses?
somebody asked that question in Westboro and I forgot what the answer is. I have to,
Okay, so thank you.
I'm sorry.
Everybody's trying to go home, but I have one more question. Ronnie O, Grafton, 90 Adams Road. Can you show me where my house is and where you're gonna start? How far behind me? There's gonna be a house right here
Correct.
and right there.
Correct.
And you're gonna cut all the trees down so I'll see them.
Now, actually, one of the town's requirements is that behind the existing houses, you have to leave a 50-foot buffer.
Oh, big deal. Okay,
Well,
all right, bad enough for me.
that's
And on the trail, you said there's gonna be parking up there? Parking spaces?
4
People
parking
going to
spaces
trails?
proposed
So
in
people from South
Westboro.
Grafton can go up there? Come on.
Yeah, they could,
I know.
if they wanted.
Everybody else will. Everybody else will.
Well, you're left at a quandary of providing an amenity, but worrying that people will use it. I mean, that's some.
It's better than them parking on the road.
The other thing about that specific spot, why that was chosen, is it's right by the intersection. It's probably the most visible spot you could create. Because the others, we had a little bit of this discussion with Westboro and about the cul-de-sac here, about putting parking spaces there. And everyone agreed that they'd rather not have parking spaces here that may be a little bit out of sight, and if somebody wants to, who knows what, illicit on, or, you know, on the trails, then they've got a little bit of camouflage of hiding. Whereas if they have to park right here at the single most visible spot, then they at least have an idea that they're going to be seen.
Okay, is there anybody else tonight? Okay. Anybody else up here at this point?
So,
Mr. Chairman, I would ask to continue the hearing to 2 meetings out from now.
that at least,
Then
will
we
give
can-
us a
then we
chance to
can
then
see.
sort of check the landscape and everything
Right,
like
sure.
that. I did just check on website. The town election is fairly late. It's May 21st. So
Really?
we
Yeah, we
actually will
changed
have
it.
a meeting before.
We changed it to after town meeting,
Right.
right?
But meaning that if, for that first
Have a little
June
more room,
meeting,
you know.
we'll have to re-advertise and for the purpose, as far as the hearing, go over a lot of these same information because we just can't start up right where we left off.
Yeah.
After 2 months, we have to recap for the new member.
Well, we'll see if we get, we, you know, probably someone will be elected, but, we could be back to an appointment. That could
That's-
happen too, and that's
That's
another month or
another,
two.
that's a discussion I wanted to have for later.
Hmm?
That's something I want to talk later in other business.
Okay. Okay. Anyway,
So I would request a continuance to 2 meetings out if,
she has a form over there,
oh,
And the date
or she will.
would be,
That would be April 8th,
April 8th.
7:30.
Move that the board grant the applicant's written request to continue this hearing to Monday, April 8th, 2019 at 7:30 PM.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted unanimously.
And for anyone in the audience who came, you received an initial public hearing notice. That's the only one that gets sent out. So the next one's going to be April 8th. You can always contact the planning department if you have a question as far as whether it's the meeting is going on or continued, or if you lose track after so many meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you for your time.
Discussion item, temporary signs.
So, understanding we have town meeting.
Could we have the conversations outside, please?
We still have work.
Thank you.
If they
We
go
still
like
have work.
through it,
I still,
they'll run
We
into
have work.
trees
Oh,
and it's on the wall.
we have work.
Which is also something. I-
Could we please talk out there? We've got more to do. Go ahead.
So I just want to put it on everyone's radar again, as far as back before the holidays, we had a couple of discussion sessions talking about some temporary signs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I put this on the agenda more as a reminder. I think one of the last things we discussed was trying to identify for signs some things that we like, don't like, and maybe to try to tackle. Since then, as you'll then see in the correspondence packet, there's been a little
Was he on the warpath or something?
little bit. There's renewed interest as far as revisiting signs, i.e. from
Berger.
administrative staff, but then also EDC. I'm recommending basically that we try to get 3 boards together to talk about signage in general, come together with more of a consensus and on how to address it. There are some things that I think warrant revisiting, like the 30 minutes after a time closes, as far as if one closes at 5:30 and then one closes at 11, they're right next door. You know, I think there's some things that we could probably revisit, but I think it's better for quite frankly, the community, for us to bring together some of the boards together and to talk about these, even if it's in the context of a larger discussion as far as economic development, some of these other projects that are going on, and you know, sort of tying it all together as far as supporting economic development businesses that are in town and all of those. So temporary signs is something that, you know, we've had a love-hate relationship over the last 5 years, and just want to put it back as far as in people's minds that this is sensitive subject, and that we do get inquiries in the office or development team as far as what can I do, what is allowed, and everything points to, well, the zoning bylaw really defines what we can and can't do, and it is something that we continually revisit, but it may have simmered on the stove enough for us to get it.
On the 30 minutes, that's not an issue until it starts being enforced. After it starts being enforced, then maybe
Yes.
there'll be something to talk about. But
Well,
I
that's-
driving around town, I noticed
We've-
very late in the evening that
Yep.
there were many signs.
Town, the building department has started to get, and town administrator's office has started to get communications as far as what's going on here, why is this happening? You know, town trying to say it's business friendly. This is not business friendly, treating one business different than the other. Well, again, that's where I point out the 5:30 closing business, and their signs off at 6, and then business that is open until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So
No.
it's a
We're not-
discussion point.
Yeah, we'll have a discussion on that, though, in another night, I think. So, anything more to say about temporary signs, other than we still trying to figure out what the question is, so we
Well,
can
well,
find an
because
answer?
part of it is also on homework, so that all of you can identify, like, even if it's in a pro con list, what do you like, what don't you like, and what are ways that maybe we can have some topics to evaluate preparing language from staff's perspective. It's, for me, it has the potential for playing darts blindfolded. I'm probably going to miss more than I hit. So getting some guidance, and that's where, you know, even among the board, we have different opinions as far as how far to allow some or how restrictive we want to be. One of the challenges, as you all know from that sign subcommittee, is that you expand the population. Having that discussion, all of a sudden that diversion of opinions expands even more than what's on the board. So, but the problem is, no matter what, 2/3 has to get past town meeting. And either extreme, as far as either having something overly restrictive or something overly lenient, isn't going to pass. So having some level of consensus for anything, you know, is going to be important to get past town meeting.
Yeah, the question will be, why are you bringing this? You know, you need a motivation for whatever you're bringing. EDC says that, you know, so-and-so, or, you know, whoever, we're finding a lot of something or other, and that motivates us to look at this, rather than just, it's on our checklist to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing I'd be interested in hearing, and I know we've heard some of this over the years, but in the recent communications that have come into the various offices or coming through EDC, I think it would be informative for us to understand what the perceived business need is for the various types of signs or the various rules that are currently being viewed as too restrictive. You know, what is the business need?
The question is, who's doing this seeing? When we had our hearing back some years ago, each person that came in had a whole different problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we find out business things. And we need, you know, you need to have a fairly broad conversation, I think.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. I want to, you know, I'd like us to have available as many different points of view on, you know, the perceived need for something that we currently don't allow.
And I think,
No, and then it's not going to be one, it's going to be many, we know that.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking even the possibility of doing a sort of a workshop type thing at the town bar, at the barn area, and inviting people from the business and from areas that particularly are affected by the signs. You know, the people are not so much driving through as people who live in the area and
Right.
stuff like that are really particularly sensitized to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that it needs a little bigger look at. We're kind of, it's been fragmented over the years, how it's
Yeah.
come together. And maybe it's time now, because we now have electronic signs and all kinds of stuff, to really sit down and take a good long look at it and see what businesses think. They may not get everything they want. See what the public thinks, you know, just everybody else,
Yeah.
the town residents, they may not get everything they want, but at least find where the most sensitive areas are.
Okay. Is that enough on that one?
Yes.
Staff report.
Couple things. I'm working on technical assistance grant for a public planning process for reuse of the DPW site. One of the things is that you know, this is again one of those things where you have a couple different people identifying broad range. Even at the board, we said, hey, what about Super Park? I think there's some legitimate possibilities that could be there. EDC previously had said we need to sell it off and try to recoup some funds or raise money. Others might say, you know, this abuts, and of course I just forgot the name of the baseball field in the back.
Minor field?
Yep, minor field, and why couldn't it be an extension, tie that to Upton Street? So I'm drafting it as basically like we did for the Worcester Street and Transit Village, where ends up having public visioning sessions trying to identify what people would like to see, how it can work off of the common. So that's due this coming Friday. So finishing up on that. As far as other things, completing work on the final paperwork for the sales partnership. I needed some information from Ginny as far as title search and what it's going to be as for a timeline so that we can actually establish a closing date. I now have that, so I'll be finishing that work. Was working with AppGeo as far as finalizing some exhibits, the plans, the maps that I had prepared for the zoning articles. Those were all just sort of my cheap sketches. They finalized it so at least it's in a more professional manner. Going through and on a staffing level, you may have heard through various public meetings, like at Board of Selectmen meetings and all of that, that because of some budgetary issues, staff in the office is basically being looked at as combining with the conservation agent and splitting that in half between between one person. I'm meeting with Sandy tomorrow to identify how that would actually work. Sandra Brock, chair of the Conservation Commission, to identify, you know, basically workload and all of that stuff. You know, we are sort of in a challenging time, and to say that there won't be an impact some way or the other, that would be basically implying that Rachel and Ann were sitting around half of their time not doing anything. So there are some things which was absolutely not true. Can't stress that enough. So there is going to be some support that we're going to have to revisit. One of those things is really affordable housing. While I continue to have more of a higher level view, one of the things that I'm doing is working with CMRPC. They were granted money through the DTLA funds for looking at regionalizing housing resources. I'm going to be hosting a planning meeting with town planners and CMRPC next week to sort of look to see what is the possibility for setting up some sort of shared services to share housing resources. When I was in Weston, we had worked with CMRPC and essentially did the same thing, sharing a housing office with Lexington, Arlington, Weston, Sudbury, Concord. So there is models out there that can be utilized, and talking to some of the other planners, there's a lot that they want to be able to do, but they don't have the resources either. So that's something that's going on. This coming Wednesday, I'm going to be attending a meeting with the Blackstone Heritage Corridor. The corridor is really trying to get up and get the Blackstone Riverway bikeway back into people's minds and on some form of path going forward. Last week, I hosted a meeting here with the planners from Millbury, Sutton, Uxbridge, and Northbridge, as well as the chair of this group with the corridor, to sort of go over some of the past work that had been done and identify from a planner's perspective how to move forward. The meeting on Wednesday is going to be with a much larger group and identifying how we can engage communities, engage the legislators, engage agencies in trying to move things forward. So hopefully I'm trying to really encourage them to reach out to towns and to sort of make official connections and get support on boards of selectmen, as well as planning boards, to gain that governmental support, but also to engage the communities to say this is a resource that in some ways is now long forgotten that we want to have for the valley. So that's another project working on. We have the ridings, and then we have two other major projects that will be coming up for our next hearing. That material is on the developments page. While the agenda meeting page may not be there yet, it's all on the development projects. That's the West Street and the library. So those materials are on there. I'd encourage you to take a look in advance. The West Street's going to be challenging. I am having it gone out to a peer consultant for traffic. There are going to be a lot of questions, and I think it is going to, any discussion we had traffic here perhaps may pale in comparison to the questions that we're going to have for that West Street multi-family development. Continuing to meet with other property landowners like McGill about the land off of Providence Road, looking at development potential there. Gene Burnett trying to identify a path forward for his project. He did want to come in for the March meeting, but we're pushing that back probably until late April, maybe even on the other side of town meeting, so we can give an update as far as where he is with that project. And we're continuing to, or I'm meeting and coordinating with Jean Poteet at Tufts. Specifically, they've talked to the trustees as far as some of the recommendations within the Transit Village, and want to have a discussion as far as evaluating their master plan and perhaps doing an amendment to consider some of the recommendations in there. So things are really busy in the office besides responding to inquiries for affordable housing units and all of that, and working with town administrator's office to try to get an ad out as soon as possible to get someone into that position, and am looking at getting some part-time support in the meantime to help with specifically some of these affordable housing tasks that Rachel had been doing. So.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. I think we have minutes of a previous meeting, January 28th.
I move that the board approve the minutes of January 28th.
Oh, wait a minute.
You've had some?
Wait. Approve the minutes as drafted with any corrections noted by the board during discussion of the motion.
Is that
Seconded.
You're seconding that?
Okay.
Okay. Now, discussion.
So, the piece where we had a discussion about the Worcester Street neighborhood village mixed use. What you say here is that I stated that gas stations should not be an allowed use since a gas station already exists in the proposed zone. I just want to add, because I had more to say about that, in that I also feel we should do one of two things. One, either add gas stations allowed use or remove Cumberland Farms from the map. So I would like that added to the minutes. That I also, that was an additional comment that I made about big village mixed use.
I think that would more accurately reflect what I remember you saying.
Right. So if you could add that.
Anything else?
I didn't notice anything to pick at when I was reading the minutes
There
earlier
was
today.
one thing, general business. Oh, is it the assessing department or the assessor's department?
They've been naming, I've noticed this, it's the planning department, not planning board. It's they're naming things
So
for the
assessing
daytime
department is
people.
correct? Oh, okay. So I just never heard it that way before, so,
It was the assessor's office, I think.
yeah.
The planning board office, conservation commission's office. Now it's changing.
I'd have to look at their sign because their website just goes directly to the Board of Assessors, so it's
Yeah.
all merged together. So,
It says Board of Assessors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. I just didn't.
I would probably, wait, where was that in the minutes?
It's under general business, I think. Maybe get back there.
Well, at that point, we might as well just say, the assessor. And we can, I'm just looking to see where. So
It
we can just
was
say Mary Oliver.
1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth item under staff report.
Probably the best word in there would be to work with the assessor and
Yeah,
apply geographic-
exactly.
or the assessor's office.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else? Been moved and seconded? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Correspondence?
Really the only thing of note ends up being, that, packet for enforcement letters going out. The other thing is that, the A&R off of North Street that we signed, carved four lots off, and in their letter communication to the board, they did identify that, their intent was to notify the town to remove those 4 lots with their intent to preserve the rest of it as open space. We've received notification. That's what's in the correspondence packet. I don't believe from town council and the board of selectmen that they've deemed that it's met the requirements for notice. So that's something that's still working on. The other thing, let's say somewhat connected to it, I need to send out an email to Bob, chairs of Board of Assessors, Conservation, as well as Tim and Board of Selectmen, to set up a sort of smaller working meeting to talk about those Upton sites. Looking at doing that next week so that we can then discuss that following week with the planning board.
Okay.
I'll just very briefly mention the other thing I noticed in the correspondence was the letter of conditional eligibility
Yeah.
for North Grafton Transit Village Overlay District.
Yes.
That seemed to suggest that we may want to or need to consider some tweaks to the zoning there sometime in the future.
Sometime in the future, yes. Yes. The challenge was that between when we did the bylaw, then submitted the application, DHCD changed regulations. So by the time they were reviewing it, things had changed. But it basically said, okay, well, we're going to assume you agree to these things, which in the letter, none of it's disagreeable. And one of the first things is I found out about that 2 weeks ago over the phone, saying we're gonna prove it. Don't worry. But just so you know, we're gonna word it this way. It's like, do I have to make any changes for town meeting? And he said no. Okay, good. Then I'll deal with it the next one if we have to.
Because it is the most confusing
Well,
letter.
well, like one of the things was that they said, well, you can't do it for senior housing. Well, we didn't want to do it for senior housing.
It just goes on
like-
and on and on.
It's like, should I have explicitly said prohibited is 55 and over community? Because that's what he basically was saying you can't do it for. Like, okay.
Okay, I thought it was just me.
The good thing is it's approved. Everything's all set. We get the 40S payments if it goes forward.
Yep, so all that's required for us to take our time to digest it when we don't have a million other things on our plate.
Yeah.
And determine what, if any, adjustments we want to make to the zoning bylaw for that district.
Unfortunately, that just reminded me of one or two other things. One, my office our office continues to support the Main Street reconstruction project. So the plans and all those things, continue through our office. There is some the roadway infrastructure work that was done on Adams Road. I think some of you may have heard about some drainage issues. Also working with the other departments to try to come up with a solution there. And then lastly, I know a lot of people are concerned about, from a transportation standpoint, commuter rail, parking, T, and some of the stuff that's happening out there. I'm representing the town of Grafton on a recently created commuter rail communities commission. It's comprised of members from all the cities and towns that are basically serviced by MBTA. They expanded to include adjacent communities, so there's like almost every community in Massachusetts on it now. But it's primarily to look and work with Mass DOT, MBTA, and other transportation agencies at specifically the commuter rail line. What to be done for improvements both at stations and access getting in and out of Boston, with the intent of supporting modernization of the commuter rail system, revisiting economic development, ridership, equity as far as all the commuter rail communities where stations are, and it's going to be a very interesting sort of body to work with over the next probably year and a half. Get to basically every quarter, Bob, meet Janet out there, because CMRPC, the regional RPCs, are all participating in this as well. So.
Okay. Reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC. Anybody? Nothing. Oh, on your report, I remember I saw someplace on social media a photograph, Joe, of a meeting here that was with the veterans.
Yes.
How did that go? And
that went very well. For anyone that went to that Main Street program presentation.
The 25% hearing.
Yep. There was specifically concerns at Simpson Square and the proximity for Sunset and Elmwood coming in. And one of the proposals that a resident came up with was, well, Sampson is all identified within the layout. It's not a defined park. It's not a defined parcel. It's all part of the town's roadway layout. What happens if we actually bring the road and tee it up on the western side, closer to the property line, which actually Dave Tyrion, who was the one that proposed it and provided comments at the hearing, had found historic photos and documents showing, like, it used to be that where Simpson Square was, that used to be sort of part of an intersection with a roadway coming here and Elmwood coming out here to create this triangle. What happened was we've reviewed this concept, which actually by bringing Elmwood in instead of continuing out, creates an opportunity for a larger green space, which then when they were talking about some of their ceremonies that they had, actually worked better for them. So they were very enthusiastic as far as that.
Who was?
The Soldiers and Veterans Trustees.
Oh, yeah.
So VHB is preparing a revised plan so that we can then submit to them and sort of show like how we can rework some of that. Basically, to keep the cannon where it is, but the stone, just move it over here and actually provide some separation. The nice thing is then some of the concerns public had as far as the fire engine coming out of the engine and then having to come into ongoing traffic in order to go down Elmwood gets eliminated because they can all stay within the same travel way coming out. and then into Elmwood because that separation is increased.
You're talking about having Elmwood go behind
The cannon.
the cannon, and make a right angle, and, Sunset coming out and making a right angle and some amount in between.
A good, yeah, actually, you're probably adding about 30% to the size of Sampson Square.
And, the veterans were okay with that.
Yeah, they actually were very supportive of that. So VHB is going to revise that plan. We're going to send it off for their next meeting so that they can at least voice their support. And then planning is the department that hosts those things. So I'll put that together for social media as well as on the website with that revised plan. And when it was discussed in comments after the hearing, because I stuck around until about 10 o'clock, a lot of the residents who were initially complaining about that Elmwood intersection thought this would actually work. So
Good, because that's been beaten up, I don't know how many times.
Yep.
At a previous session, I know I made and other people made some suggestions about other ways to orient those roads, and they're, never heard anything more from it. The engineers were gonna go off
and that's where, there was a change in staff as well. And unfortunately, there may have been some things that were intended on following up that never had with the staff change. So
I'm not sure whether we, or I, was aware of how extensive the right-of-way or the town land was on the west side. Okay, anybody else? Anything else? Is there anything else that may legally come before us?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Not debatable. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted.